Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. Today we're going to be talking about the Dendro Archon Nahida. She's getting her first rerun in Genshin Impact, and she is one of the strongest characters in the game. We're going to be talking about, is she actually a must pull? Is she a character that every single one of you should be wishing on your account if you wish to make your account stronger? We're going to talk about what are her strongest teams, what is she good for, what are her weaknesses, what is she not good for. Let's get into it. The community perception and history of this character is very, very good. From the time of release, there is an expectation that all Archons are going to be very, very powerful, and she does not disappoint at all. She is one of the strongest characters of the strongest elements, so it's kind of a match made in heaven. Naturally, she's a really, really excellent character. I'm gonna rip the band-aid off right now and say that no, Nahida is not a must-pull character. No character in Genshin Impact is a must-pull because the characters given for free are strong enough to clear the content in the game and flexible enough to deal with any situation. So she is not a must-pull unit. However, I would argue that Nahida is pretty much as close as you can get to being a must-pull unit in Genshin Impact. She is one of the characters that, in my opinion, unlocks your account. There aren't very, very many 5-stars that work in as many teams as she does and that are as an account-wide boost as this character gives you. Other Dendro characters exist, but a lot of them want to actually be paired with Nahida. You can definitely build very strong Dendro teams with Dendro Traveler for off-field Dendro or even Kale, but no one quite reaches the level of Nahida. Her role is an off or on-field Dendro applicator, damage dealer, and buffer. So she really does it all. It's kind of a crazy, crazy kit. One of the most valuable things in Genshin Impact, and you always want to look out for this, is off-field characters that deal damage and then buff the team. This is a very, very powerful spot to be in for a lot of characters. Very, very few 5-stars are like this. Yelan is like this somewhat. Kazuha is like this. Miko is off-field, but she doesn't buff, and she also spends a fair bit of time on-field to set up her off-field stuff. Sucrose is an off-field unit. Fischl is an off-field unit. So you can see all the off-field units that we're talking about here that do a lot of damage or that do some buffing are generally very, very highly regarded. And so that's one of the things you want to look out for. And Nahida is a prime example, because not only does she apply a ton of her element, meaning you can get lots of hyper blooms, which is one of the strongest teams in the game. The more Dendro you have on the enemy, the more blooms you can make, and that's really, really good. But she also does a lot of damage herself if you build her right. Mine is not a crazy build. She gets a bit of crit rate from her passive, so she's got a pretty reasonable crit ratio, but my artifacts are nothing crazy. They're achievable. I've got a really, really good goblet that kind of carries this build. My hat is okay. My sands is really quite good. My feather is very, very bad, honestly. And my flower is pretty okay. And my talents are nothing insane either. I think that they're 8 and 7. I can't really scroll down here. But all I'm saying is despite my relatively low investment on this build, she is level 90 because Dendro reactions generally want level 90. Even though mine is low investment, she does a lot of damage, and she really is a contributor to your team's damage. So unlike off-field characters like either Yao Yao, Dendro main character, Kale, though their value basically begins and ends with their elemental application, whereas that Nahida, not only does she have that even more elemental application for more blooms or for more whatever reaction, but she also does a lot of damage, and she does that all from off field, and she buffs your on field character's elemental mastery. So with all these things together, you can see why she is one of the most sought after characters in the game, and basically someone that I would recommend, if you're on the fence about her, I would recommend that everyone goes for her. I would not recommend that she's a must pull. If you don't like her, you know, if you prefer other characters instead, if you really, really love Nilou, you know what I'm saying? You can get by without her. You know, don't let this video tell you that you have to pull her if you don't want to, right? But if you have extra wishes, if there's no one you're saving for in particular, if there's anything you're on the fence and you're thinking of getting her, just do it. Go for her, right? Use your extra wishes to get her. But don't feel bad if you can't, because there are alternatives. Dendro main character can work great in Hyper Bloom teams. Kale can work great in Aggravate teams. Yao Yao even better in Aggravate teams because she has that healing. I would say her only con is that she is a little bit difficult to gear, right? I would like to have a lot more elemental mastery than I do. I'm really kind of lacking in that department, but she still, you know, serves her purpose fully. And it's hard to get a good elemental mastery sands. You can either go elemental mastery or Dendro damage goblet, and you can go elemental mastery or crit hat. I'm choosing to go a bit more crit on my build with elemental mastery weapon, but I'm not saying it's the best. She's a complicated character to build. You kind of have to just go for whatever is best on your account. so to speak, right? If you have certain artifacts that are better than others, right? If your dendro damage goblet is great and your elemental mastery one sucks, like me, then you can go for dendro damage, right? Or vice versa. Same with the hat, right? If I had an elemental mastery hat with 40 crit value, I'm sure I'd be using that one instead, right? So you can, so she has some pros and cons with building her. It's very complicated, but I think I would simplify it, because I spent a lot of time stressing out about how I was going to build her exactly. And I think the best way is just to simplify it and say whatever artifacts that you have that fit, just go with those, because everyone's account is different. Plus, no matter what artifacts you choose, she's going to be so strong that it'll make up for even if you have some suboptimal artifacts. I would say her other con is that in multi-wave content on teams that can't swap out of her, so Sino teams, and probably some other teams that I can't think of right now. And her that's another con for her, is that her elemental application, it only exists on the characters that she uses her skill on. So when there's a new wave, you have to swap back to an user skill. Usually not a big deal, but for some teams it can be a problem. And then also her buff only affects the on-field character. If it affected all the characters, that would be even better. Of course, it's not really a con, because neither of these things aren't. Yes, they're cons, but like, you're always going to have aspects of a kit that are not perfect, right? Not everything is going to be the most perfect thing ever. It's important to, have some downsides to a kit, and that's what hers are. Some people also say like that the amount of dendro application that she puts on enemies can make it hard to swirl, electro, and aggravate teams. While that can be true, if you don't do the right rotations off the hop with other dendro characters, you can run into the same issue. So I think the issue is a bit blown out of proportion, and it's still generally worth the slot in that team unless you'd rather play her on the other side. However, this slight con can make it, easier to stomach running Yao Yao instead on an aggravate team. I find myself not really caring either way. If I can run Nahida on aggravate Kaching, I will, but I don't mind running Yao Yao at all. Some other pros that I'd mention is that she's by default great in AoE, because every time that you create an elemental reaction with one character tagged to her skill, it does damage and has elemental application to all the other characters that are tagged by that skill. So it's like pseudo crowd control without actually needing crowd control. Really, really great for Nilou teams. It does require either you have a second dendro unit or her to be on field, because her elemental application is tied to a reaction actually happening, but it's rarely a problem, and it's really, 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 really strong. She also gives great particle generation. She generates a ton of particles for the on-field characters, so characters like Sino, Alhaitham really appreciate that, and you don't need to run much ER on her to get her burst up on cooldown. She also provides a really solid buff. Not an insane buff, but a really solid buff as well. In terms of how she feels to play, how strong she feels, I personally really like how she feels to play when she's off-field. I love using her skill. I love how long her burst lasts, how long her skill lasts. Really, really nice. Nice to play. She's not my absolute favorite to play on field personally, because I just find her targeting kind of clunky. Just her steppy thing, it just doesn't feel very satisfying. It doesn't feel like you're doing a lot. A kind of a problem I have with most of the small chibi style characters. So she's not my favorite for on field, but I really, really do like her on field, and she feels extremely strong to play. Right, like you notice when you have a Nahida on your team, it feels very strong, which is always a good feeling, right? There's knowing technically that it's strong, but when it feels strong, it's a whole other ballgame. Before we go into teams and what teams she's good on, if you're finding this video helpful, or if you found Nahida's Archon quest as heart-wrenching and amazing as I did, please consider subscribing to the video. I would really appreciate it. I heard from Nahida herself that if every single one of you subscribe, she will be safe forever, never be captured again. So please consider doing that. We are so close to monetization, and I really, really would appreciate it. When we're looking at teams for Nahida, we almost have to look at who she doesn't work with rather than who she does, because it is crazy the amount of teams that she works with. Not only does she work in, of course, every single dendro team comp that you could think of, she also has some teams that are exclusive to her because of how much dendro application she provides. None of these teams are like meta defining. For example, a Melt Ganyu team with burning, that's something that only Nahida is able to do. Same with an air fryer team, I believe only really works, which is dendro pyro double Animo, mostly Venti Kazuha, and that really only works with Nahida because of how much dendro application she provides. So there are some exclusive teams with her, but she also, you know, she's an amazing partner with Yelan, of course, with Kazuha. Basically, rather than go through every character, I guess the main archetypes is you can go through the Hyper Bloom team with either with either a Dendro, a Hyper Bloom team, any variation of those, a Burgeon team, a Fridge team, Hyper Fridge team, Bloom team, Nilu, Bountiful Chorus Bloom team, Aggravate team. We already talked about Burning. You can do a Burgeon team. You can do a Salad team, which is when you have an animal character triggering the Hyper Bloom in a Hyper Bloom team. The Thundering Fury Razor team, we already mentioned Aggravate. Eula Hyper Bloom is Eula's best team with Nahida. We talked about Melt Ganyu with Burning. Those are pretty much the main teams. Any Dendro team, rest assured that if you get Nahida, you won't be short of characters to pair her with. Most of the time, I just wish I had two Nahida for a lot of my teams. Looking at her future prospects, I mean, I think her future prospects look great. The only character I was kind of concerned about was actually Baiju. I was thinking maybe if Baiju provides some great off-field elemental application, but people's predictions are that Baiju's application is mainly single target, and so he will not be a suitable replacement in Nahida for AoE based teams such as Nilu and some other teams, and his elemental application is not as strong as Nahida. So I don't see her getting replaced anytime soon, especially since now we have the 5-star healer role covered, which because what are they going to do, another off-field buffer that does even more buffing? I doubt it. I kind of, if I had to lay a stake on it, of course it could always change, but I would say that she's going to be the premier Dendro off-field enabler until the end. I think she's a very valuable unit to get. I will say that you don't have to feel rushed, right? If you don't have the primos for her right now, you don't need to spend right now. She's coming back, right? She's an Archon. She'll rerun often. Every character will rerun, but she'll rerun often because she is an Archon. So don't feel pressured, but I think if there's such a thing as being future-proof, then she's probably it. In terms of overworld and aesthetics, I mean, Genshin rarely ever misses with aesthetics, right? She looks great. Her animations are top tier. Her burst animation, her skill animation, her design, everything about it is top tier. She's not my favorite design as like a more chibi style character. It's not really my favorite, but that's just personal preference, right? I've seen some fan renditions of if she was a medium female model or a tall female model. Those look really cool. You know, Greater Lord Ruka Devata, she looked really cool. So I kind of wish we got something like that, but as is, I don't mind her at all. I think she looks really great. I think she's perfect for what she is, and in the overworld she's awesome. Obviously she has that special passive where she could pick up things from afar. I find myself not using it all that much. I like Tainari's passive a little bit better for seeing where things are, but overall, you know, great in the overworld, great in the abyss, great character. If you want to see what I think of Nilu, check out that video over there. She's rerunning right now as well, and if you want to see how I think Nahida stacks up against every other character in the game, check out my tier list video over there. Bye for now.